Hi, fifth graders. Today we're going to wrap up our unit by talking about some common word problems you might see when you're working with fraction division. And with fraction division, or really any kind of division question, I always recommend starting by asking yourself the question, what am I splitting apart? That question will be so helpful in making sure that you set up your division problem accurately. So one of the main kinds of questions you'll see will be to write an equation based on a story problem. So let's take a look at an example of that type of question. In this story problem, I have Benito has 1/3 kilogram of grapes. He divides the grapes equally into 3 bags. What fraction of a kilogram of grapes is in each bag? So again, if I'm getting that mental movie, I can see this boy Benito. He's standing at his kitchen counter. He has a big bag of grapes and a bunch of little Ziplocs, and he's starting to separate out the big bag of grapes so that he has little baggies, maybe for lunch for the week or for snacks. So I can kind of picture what's going on here. Now, let's go line by line to see how we can answer that question, what am I splitting apart? So the first question, or the first sentence says, Benito has 1/3 of a kilogram of grapes. That tells me I'm starting with 1/3 of a kilogram. Then the second sentence says, he divides the grapes equally into 3 bags. This confirms that I'm splitting apart the 1/3 of a kilogram and I'm breaking it up into 3 bags. That'll help me answer what fraction of a kilogram of grapes is in each bag. So if I'm asked to write an equation, I know that the amount I'm splitting apart always comes first because the dividend is always written first in a division equation. So if I'm splitting apart 1/3 of a kilogram of grapes, I need to write the 1/3 first. Then, since I'm dividing it into 3 bags, I know that I can take that 1/3 and divide it by 3, which is going to give me a mystery amount, n. A lot of times you'll see letters to hold the place of numbers that we haven't solved for yet. So I could write the equation 1/3 divided by 3 equals n. Now this, of course, is a division equation. You might also be asked to see or to match a related multiplication sentence. Now we know that to solve a division problem, we use KFC. Keep the first number the same, flip the second number, and then change the sign to multiplication. So all we have to do to write a related multiplication sentence is to follow the steps of KFC. So I could write 1/3 times 1/3 equals n because I kept the first number the same, I flipped the second number, and I changed the sign to multiplication. If the problem doesn't ask you to solve, you could list a letter like n, or you could put the final answer in as part of your equation. So that's one way that you'll be asked to look at fraction division problems. You might also be asked to look at an equation and complete a story problem based on it. So let's look at an example of that. We might be asked to complete a story problem to represent 3 divided by 1/4. I can still start by asking myself, what am I splitting apart? But this time I'm going to look at that expression, 3 divided by 1/4. Again, I know that the amount I'm splitting apart is always written first. So that means I must be splitting apart 3 full groups of something into pieces that are 1/4 big. So you'll be given a couple sentences of the story problem with some blanks. It might look something like this. Carmen has a roll of paper that is blank feet long. She cuts the paper into pieces that are each blank foot long. So since I'm splitting apart the 3, I know that I need to fill in that first part of my story problem with a 3 because that first part tells me what I'm starting with. So now I could say that Carmen has a roll of paper that is 3 feet long. And since the 1/4 is my divisor, that tells me that she cuts the paper into pieces that are each 1/4 of a foot long. Finally, you might also get one last sentence in your story problem that's asking you to solve. So I could write, how many pieces of paper does Carmen have? And then I know I could solve 3 divided by 1/4 to tell me that Carmen has 12 pieces of paper. So a lot of times you'll be asked to either write an equation or to look at an equation and match it to a story problem. You might also be asked to match some models to story problems as well. And again, you'll still start by asking yourself, what am I splitting apart? So let's take a look at a couple examples where we need to match a model. The first example reads, Brendan made a loaf of bread. He gave equal portions of half the loaf to 6 friends. Which diagram could Brendan use to find the fraction of the loaf of bread that each friend got? Now you'll notice I haven't put any of the diagrams up yet. That's because I recommend covering those up or hiding those diagrams until you get a good sense of what this question is really asking you to solve. So let's go line by line to figure that out. The first sentence says, Brendan made a loaf of bread. That gives me great background information, but nothing that I'm going to use so far for my math. The next sentence says, he gave equal portions of half the loaf to 6 friends. Okay, so now I know that that one loaf that I started with has already been cut in half. So I'm picturing Brendan cutting it in half and putting half of the loaf away for himself. Then he's taking that half of the loaf that was left over and slicing it up into 6 pieces for his 6 different friends. That can help me solve which diagram Brendan could use to find the fraction of the loaf that each friend got. Now, before you look at the diagrams, I would recommend writing the equation that this story problem represents, because it will help you match your model and check your answer at the end. Since I'm splitting apart half of a loaf of bread and I'm sharing it with 6 people, my equation could be 1/2 divided by 6 equals n. Okay, now let's get to the part where we actually look at the pictures. In this example, I have 4 different diagrams here. So what I would suggest is going through and crossing off right away the diagrams that don't start by splitting apart 1/2. This first diagram starts with a half, but what it's doing is it's just showing me that 3/6 is equal to 1/2. That's not really splitting the 1/2 into 6 equal pieces. So I know that can't be the diagram that matches. Similarly, the bottom diagram is starting with 6 full loaves of bread. I see 6 totally separate squares, and each of those squares is divided into 2 pieces. So this isn't showing me 1/2 divided by 6 because I'm actually starting by splitting apart 6. So this can't be my model either. Now looking at the middle two, they both start with 1/2. I can tell because I have some solid lines and some dotted lines. Those dotted lines show me that this part of my model is just made to show the equal size pieces. The solid lines show me that I've taken this half of the rectangle and split it into 6 smaller sections. So now we have to figure out, well, what's different then about these two models? In the first example, I only have one of those 6 pieces colored in. But in the second example, I have all 6 of those 6 pieces colored in. And that brings up a big idea, which centers around this word each. If I want to know how much each friend got, that means I want the model that shows the amount for one person, not all 6 friends. This third model shows the half of a loaf. That's showing all 6 friends. So that's not really answering my question. Instead, I need to look at the model that only has one piece shaded in to show each friend or one person. So that second model will be the one to match this story problem. Let's take a look at one more match a model question. This one says, Sebastian has 4 pounds of nuts. He wants to put the nuts into bags that each weigh 1/3 pound. Which diagram could Sebastian use to find the number of bags he could make? So again, let's go line by line and write an equation first. I know Sebastian has 4 pounds of nuts, and he wants to put the nuts into bags that each weigh 1/3 of a pound. That tells me that in order to find the diagram that matches, I need to split apart the 4 pounds of nuts into bags that are 1/3 of a pound each. So I'll write the equation 4 divided by 1/3 equals n. Now I can use that to help me match one of these 4 models. Again, I would suggest crossing off anything that doesn't start by splitting apart 4 separate groups. This second model just shows that 3/12 is equal to 1/4. I don't have 4 separate rectangles here, so that's not my correct answer. Finally, this fourth model is getting a little closer, but this time we have 3 full groups that are split into fourths. That can't be my model because it's actually showing a different division sentence. Now, these next two both split apart 4. I'm starting with 4 distinct circles in my first model, and I have 4 separate rectangles in my third model. But in the first model, I have one of those pieces shaded in, where in the third model, nothing is shaded. The big idea here is that when we see pieces of our model shaded in, only the shaded pieces will count as our answer. When no pieces are shaded, we have to count all the little sections. That means my first model can't be my correct answer, because what that's really showing then is 4 divided by 3, which is going to give me 1 1/3 as a final answer. That's not correct. Instead, I need to count each individual section to show 4 divided by 1/3, which is what my third model does. So when you're looking at these questions, make sure to write out that equation first. Remember how I said that's a great way to check your answer? Well, if I did 4 divided by 1/3, I would get an answer of 12. Since the top model does not show 12 pieces, I know that must mean that this third model is correct. So be on the lookout for these common division word problems and story problems. I think this stuff is super fun. You have to be a math detective to figure it out. You guys can do it. I am so proud of you for working hard. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to do more of these with you.